everyone, welcome to Painting Crafty, and today I'm going to be crafting a primitive style Santa Claus ornament using some simple fabric, muslin, and then adding a needle felting at the end to create a big old fun mustache and some big old eyebrows for this whimsical style Santa Claus. Today I'm a part of a YouTube collaboration. We have two hosts today. We have Dawn with Shabby Meets Bling and Monica with Up All Night DIY. Now you're going to find the links to their channels inside of my description box, as well as a playlist link for all of the other creators who have joined in today's collaboration. Well, let's get started. I have lots to share with you, and I want to take you through this fun little journey of I almost created a scary looking Santa Claus. Well, I'll show you what I did and how I was able to save it. So I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started. The fabric I chose to build this ornament out of is muslin. It's considered a utility fabric, so it's very inexpensive. You can buy it at Joann Fabrics, Walmart, all your places you would buy fabric. I created a cardboard template of a triangle 9 inches tall and 6.5 inches wide. I traced it around using a friction pin. These you can buy at Walmart. They work great for being able to erase easily the line work. It erases with heat, so you can either use your heat tool or your iron at the end to remove any of the pen marks. It's like magic, it disappears easily. When tracing around, when I get to the bottom, I make sure I add a little bit more area. I trace lines on each side of where I want to create the opening to add the stuffing, to make sure I leave an opening because I need to remember not to sew that closed. I'm going to go ahead and pin it at this stage because I'm going to be sewing on the pen line. So I'm going to just make a rough cut around my pattern and then go ahead and sew on my line. I'm just an inexperienced sewer. I bought my sewing machine about a year ago. I just sew now and again. I do enjoy it, but I'm not very good at it. But that's the nice thing about doing this primitive style art. It doesn't have to be perfect to get a nice product. So here I'm going to go ahead and just trim around my fabric. You're going to see that it's just a rough cut, nothing precise. And then I'm going to go ahead and sew, take it to my sewing machine and sew on that line. And here I'm remembering to mark those lines at the bottom to make sure I remember to back stitch on those areas and leave that opening in the middle so I can add the stuffing. And now it's all sewed, and you can see my lines are not perfect at all. I cannot sew a straight line, but I can go ahead and erase my line work now with my heat tool, and that line is just going to disappear, and it's going to turn out okay. That's the great thing about doing this primitive style. It doesn't have to be perfect to get a nice look. And now I'm going ahead and just creating a seam allowance around. This is when I'm cutting about 1/4 inch all the way around my piece. And then I'm creating these little nip marks all the way around. This is just going to help my fabric lay more flat when I turn it the right side out. Once I have it clipped all the way around, I'm going to take this turning tool to do this. So it's kind of a pipe with a stick, and you put the plastic pipe through the hole, and then you take that stick and you kind of just shove the fabric down inside of the hole. It's great for turning inside out items that are kind of small, a little hard to reach into, and then once you have your fabric piece all the way through, you just pull it on out and your piece is turned the right way you want it. That tool, the little stick that comes with that piece, works great to be able to put into the tips and push those so that you make sure you got nice little points on your items. So I just use that stick to be able to turn my piece and get my corners turned out the right way. Once I have my piece all turned out and ready to go, now it's time to add the stuffing. The polyfill that I like to use is this one. It stuffs really well. It's perfect for making these little doll type ornaments. You want to go ahead and separate your fill just a little bit so you're not trying to just clunk all in one big piece. Use that stuffing tool or that turning tool part to add the stuffing to the very tips. This is a process that you want to add quite a bit of stuffing, a lot more than what you think. You want to pack it in there, give it a little massage at the end so you can get the lumps and bumps out, but you want to be able to ensure that you make sure that you stuff your piece with enough of that stuffing to give it a nice filled look. At the end, this is where I'm going to go ahead and just stitch this shut. I'm just using a little bit of the crochet thread that I'm going to be using later to create the face with. I'm just using that on my needle, just doing a simple little whip stitch around the bottom. Enter on one side, gap over the fabric, and then come right back around. And at the end, when you get to the end, you just tie a knot and your piece is closed off. It's nice to have that seam at the bottom. Nobody's really going to see it. Now it's time to go ahead and do a little painting. I'm going to be using the Tuscan Red color and Deco Art paint. I add maybe about a tablespoon of paint in there, and then I'm going to be adding some water to thin my paint out. This is just going to help the paint slide across the fabric so much easier. It's going to absorb in more evenly, and it's just a great way to add paint to fabric. Fabric paints differently than what wood would, or absorbs paint differently, so the water is just going to help it slide across my fabric. The red I'm mixing, I'm going to be using for the top part of his hat. I went down at the most a third of the way. I need plenty of room to be able to put a hat band, a nose, some bushy eyebrows, and a big old mustache at the bottom, so I wanted to make sure I had plenty of room to add those items. I carry the paint all the way down to the back, taking extra care to make sure I get the stitching lines in the seams for where the thread might be. After I got the paint on, I went ahead and gave it a dry, and then took some 220 sandpaper and lightly sanded it. You don't want to go too heavy with this process, or you can sand right through your material. When you're putting the red on, you want to take extra care not to get any of it on your white area, because the bottom area is only receiving coffee stain, and you'll see any little red bits of paint that might get down there. I had some red dust from the sanding, so I went ahead and took a chip brush and just brushed it off, and that solved the problem. I no longer had a pink Santa. The next step is I need to create a template for the nose, and I was going to do like a rectangle shape. So this craft stick was kind of the perfect little width that I needed. I laid it down on my Santa, and then I took a pencil and traced around it on each side. In the end, you're not going to be able to see the pencil mark, so it's no worry about having the pencil mark there. And then I put 2 little dots on each side of where I wanted to kind of establish where I wanted to go ahead and stitch my eyes. To do the stitching, I'm going to be using a 3-inch doll needle and Aunt Lydia's crochet thread. You go ahead and thread your needle from the back, add a knot in the back, and then pull it through. You're going to be following those lines that we drew with the pencil. So start at the top, pull your needle all the way through, come down about no more than 1/4 inch, come underneath your fabric, pick a little bit of that polyfill up into your stitch, then come out on the other side where you drew your line. Give your thread just a little bit of a tug. Come down on that side you are on about another 1/4 inch, go underneath, pick up some of that polyfill, come to the line again, and give it a pull. You're going to create this stitch, a ladder stitch kind of, all the way down your nose, making sure you're picking up a little bit of the polyfill to add a little bit of a bulk to your nose as you go down. Once we get down to the bottom of our line, we're going to be traveling back up, just going the opposite direction and filling in the lines that we didn't do on our way down. You can create a different nose look just by pulling your thread tighter. If you want your nose skinnier at the top, just pull the thread tighter. And then you can make your nose wider by giving less tension as you go down. Once you reach the top and you've finished all your stitches, go back out the same hole you started and put a knot in the back. To create the eyes, I switched to the color black and went through the same hole that I used to stitch my nose with. I'm going to be creating a star shape for these eyes. So I used the center point of the pencil that I drew as the center point, and I'm first going to be creating a cross shape. So I'm going underneath my fabric, this time not having any of the polyfill underneath there. I just want fabric. So I come across and then go to the top point of my cross underneath there with my needle, pull it down to measure up where I want to go next, come down with that part, and I'm going to be going underneath my fabric to the point of where I want to start my star point. So I'm going underneath my fabric to the corner in between those 2 lines, to create the star. Then I'm going to be coming across. It does help to lay it across. It gives you an idea of how much measuring you need to do. So I'm coming underneath there, and then I'm going to go in between those 2 lines underneath to create the next part of my star. And then I take my stitch and I go under, and I'm going to go all the way underneath my nose. This is when that doll needle comes in handy. It's extra long and I don't have to go through the back. I can just go right underneath my item and continue the stitch. And I'm going to do the same on the other eye, creating that little star look. Once I have the eye stitched, I'm going to go out the back, the same hole. And this is when I'm going to tie my knot. I didn't start with a knot. I just left my string long enough so it wouldn't pull all the way through. And then I go ahead and tie it off on the back, giving it a nice finished look. To give that rustic feel to my Santa Claus, I mixed some instant coffee with hot water to create a stain. I used it all over my Santa on the front and the back. And I mixed probably it was about a half a cup of hot water and maybe a teaspoon or two of coffee. But this is when I almost made my Santa look scary. I put my coffee stain on everywhere, and then I took my heat tool and started the drying process. And then that's when I noticed, oh my goodness, look at how scary the Santa Claus was looking. The water was evaporating around the divoted areas and going darker and making these super creased lines. So I took my little sprayer mister of water and started squirting the fabric, and then took kind of a stiffer brush and scrubbed the fabric just a little bit, and I was able to soften the coffee. Yay! No more scary Santa Claus. I was able to save it. And once I had him all the way dry, it was time to add those rosy cheeks on. So I chose 3 colors, cactus flower, Tuscan red, and deep burgundy, to add the glow to his little cheeks. I started with the lightest color, cactus flower. I take a scruffy brush, put some on there, but then I always scrub it on the paper, and then as a final test, I put it on my hand and give it another rub to make sure it's nice and dry. And when it feels dry, then I know enough is off that I can go ahead and apply it. You always want to start slow and then build your layers up. So after putting the cactus flower on and the Tuscan red, I thought I would want one more deep color. And deep burgundy seemed to fit the bill of adding that little inner glow to darken up his cheeks. He's looking pretty happy now. No more scary Santa. To go ahead and finish off his hat, I took a little bit of this fabric, this ticking fabric. It's another utility fabric, and I went ahead and I coffee stained that and created the little band. I'm just going to glue it on the back. Once it was glued, I just took whatever I might have, so a little bit of this, a little bit of that, to create a little bit of interest to his hat band. These are actually little tiny red bells on a paper covered wire, and they look so cute. I went ahead and glued some of those on there just to add a little bit more interest to that red area. Often I like to add little bits of like string or some of this excelsior. I love the little whimsical nature that it creates, and I like that little bit of look of a nest maybe at the top of his hat. For the final detail, I'm going to be adding a little bit of wool using a felting needle. This wool is kind of special to me. It's from a friend. We've been friends since the 8th grade, and she had inherited some of this wool from her mom, and I wanted to make something special for her in remembrance of her mom. So I thought this would be perfect to add some big old fluffy eyebrows at the top. I'm going to be using a single felting needle. These are from Clover. It's a fine tooth needle. Now, felting needles are sharp, and what they do is they press the fabric down into the polyfill, and it locks it in there and it holds it tight so it becomes one. So you don't have to add any glue. You just add different pressure, popping up and down with your needle. And you have to be a little careful because they are sharp. The more you pounce in one area, the tighter that becomes. So you can actually use it to sculpt. You can be able to push your needle up inside of there and attach it and make it firmer by more pouncing up and down in one spot. And if you want it more fluffy, just use less pouncing up and down motion. It kind of sounds easy, and it actually is easy. I haven't done very difficult processes with this particular needle, but I do find it very interesting and look forward to doing a few more projects with it. So once I had the eyebrows done, I just took some of the felt, and I decided that the good spot to be able to do a tighter pounce would be directly underneath his nose to give the mustache two distinct sides, one on the left, one on the right. But I wanted to have some fluffy areas, but I went ahead and started by pouncing kind of all over it generally to hold it down so I didn't have to fumble with it too much. And then I made sure that my whiskers were attached at the bottom as well, so pouncing up and down around my piece, and then applying more of those pouncing motions in the middle and less as I went out. When putting the wool pieces on, you don't have to feel like you have to have them exactly right away. You can always add additional on top. And that's what I did to make his mustache extra fluffy. To finish him, I added a string to the top to be able to hang him, and then attached a bell there as well. I wanted to make a couple more sizes, so I made a smaller one and a mini one, and they turned out adorable. I wanted to say an extra special thank you to Don and Monica for hosting today's collaboration. Make sure you check out their channels inside of the description box, as well as click that playlist so you can see all the other creative ideas shared in today's Christmas collaboration. If you're new to my channel and you like to do art and crafts, come on over and see what I have to offer. I'd love to have more creative friends join me. Leave me a comment if you might be inspired to go ahead and give sewing a chance. Even though you might not be an experienced sewer, you know, it doesn't really matter. They all turned out cute in the end. Well, thanks for hanging out with me today, and hopefully you'll come back and see me again. And next time, you'll create right along with me.